starting off with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So we all know he's running as a Democrat. And many of us have told him point blank to his face, this isn't going to work. They're not going to ever allow you to be the nominee. I've told him that. I know Jimmy Dore has told him that. I know a lot of people have told him that it is just, why run as a Democrat? Joe Biden's their guy for now. I still think they're going to end up replacing Joe Biden, but it won't be with him. It won't be with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. If they replace Joe Biden, the way they're going to do it is at the convention, Joe Biden will be handing all of his delegates off to somebody like Gavin Newsom. We're going to get into that because Gavin Newsom says, no, I'm not running. But Gavin Newsom doesn't need to run. I've already given my theory on this, but I'll give it again about how Biden is not going to be the Democratic nominee. I think it's going to be Gavin Newsom, but they're going to be doing the 1-2 switcheroo without a Democratic primary. They're trying to avoid a primary because they don't want to have to run people, and they don't want to have somebody like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. win. They don't want to risk it. They want one of their establishment buddies in that position. So what they're going to do is something they've done in the past. They did this in 1968. They essentially don't need to hold a primary. The person who ends up winning or being granted or anointed the DNC nominee is somebody that the delegates just decide on without the voters. That's what happened in 1968. And they're going to do it again. They're basically going to say, well, it's too late to have a true Joe Biden won the primaries. That's what they're going to claim. But Joe, something's wrong. He can't really run. He can't take over. He's going to step aside. What are we going to do? And they're going to take all of his delegates and they're going to hand them over to their establishment, the one they've been grooming, Gavin Newsom. And then they're going to have another crisis. They're going to say, oh no, but Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris are both from the great state of California, so he can't have Kamala as his running mate. Oh no, what are we going to do? So they're going to replace Kamala Harris with someone else. That's just my theory. That's my theory. And so then we end up with this Gavin Newsom, Amy Klobuchar, or Gavin Newsom, Stacey Abrams, whoever they decide to make him his running mate. And that would be the ticket on the general election. And they're able to do this. The DNC is allowed to really do whatever the hell they want. And that is what brings us into Robert F. Kennedy Jr. tonight. He has acknowledged that the DNC is pretty much rigging their primaries. They have all of these really crazy rules that make it impossible for someone like him to actually compete against Joe Biden and win. And because of it, he's actually looking at alternatives. It sounds like he may be looking at making an independent run. Why don't you just watch this clip and then we'll talk about it. Here it is.
It's pretty clear that the DNC does not want a primary. I don't want to say that they want a coronation, but that's, I think that that's a fair way to put it, actually. They're essentially fixing the process so that it makes it almost impossible to have democracy function. They're effectively disenfranchising the Democratic voters from having any choice in who becomes president, or who becomes the Democratic nominee. So two of the things they've done to date is they've moved the Iowa primary. They've made rules that if anybody campaigns in Iowa or any candidate sets foot in the state of Iowa or sets foot in the state of New Hampshire, then none of the votes that are cast for that candidate will be tallied. In other words, any delegate that I win in New Hampshire or Iowa would go instead to the president. And now they're trying to change it so that if I campaign in New Hampshire, that none of the votes cast for me in Georgia will count. And that's significant because it's hard to win the nomination without Georgia.
What is the logic?
Well, they're rigging it so that it, effectively, we're looking at the tabulations now that look like if you add up all the super delegates that they control and all of the automatic delegates that just go to the party and go to the president, I would have to win almost 80% of all of the states in order to beat President Biden, even if he only wins 20%.
And yet you continue on. So what is your strategy then in light of this for defeating President Biden?
These rules will not be finalized until September 14th, and we've written the DNC protesting. I mean, there's some really wild things that they're now considering, including forcing me to actually pay for the primaries. And their logic is that they don't need a primary because they already have a candidate. And therefore, I'm costing them all this money, and that money should be paid for by me and, maybe Marianne Williamson. So it's not, it's a process that is rigged. And we live at a time in American history when a lot of Americans think that democracy is broken, that the political system is rigged, and that there's not really any democracy. And unfortunately, the DNC is taking a lot of steps that confirm that outlook.
If the decision holds for the current, sort of primary structure with the DNC, what is the route to victory for you against President Biden?
Oh, if the DNC is going to rig it so that it is simply impossible for anybody to challenge President Biden, then I need to look at other alternatives, because I can't go back to the people support me and to my donors and say, I'm in this to make a point. I need to show them a road to victory.
What kind of alternatives would you be exploring, Mr. Kennedy?
Well, I don't know exactly, because I want to see what the DNC does. I want to see if they make it a fair contest. And I'm not asking that it be 100% fair, but I'm asking that there at least be, a chance that it be plausible for somebody else to win other than their, chosen anointed candidate.
There you go, saying, I'm not asking for it to be 100% fair. Well, I would like it to be 100% fair. I don't know, that's just me. I think it's really interesting, though, that, he's like, well, I just make it somewhat more fair, not 100% fair. Okay, so let me explain exactly what's going on and what he's talking about. It's really unclear what exactly he's talking about. He's got a little bit of inside information, I think, that hasn't been put out there in the public. But the background information that we know, and what we know for sure that's going on inside of the DNC, is that essentially the DNC wants South Carolina to be the very first primary. They claim the reason is because South Carolina is more diverse. That's what the DNC is saying. We all know the truth. The truth is that in 2020, there were 3 primaries held prior to South Carolina. There was Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada, and Joe Biden lost in all 3 of those. He did not win any of those primaries. He didn't win until South Carolina. And after he won South Carolina, he supposedly picked up momentum, and then he ended up being the eventual nominee. But if you remember, Iowa was a caucus, and that was declared, they claimed that Pete Buttigieg won Iowa. That was contested. It was really neck and neck between him and Bernie Sanders. New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders won. Nevada, Bernie Sanders won. So Bernie Sanders was winning those 3 primaries. And of course, the DNC was not going to let Bernie Sanders become the eventual nominee. And so Joe Biden wins South Carolina, and then he subsequently wins the South, and he ends up being the nominee. And they say everybody needs to rally around Joe Biden. So because of that, they don't want an embarrassment again. They don't want to embarrass the sitting president of the United States and have him lose Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada to maybe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Marianne Williamson, who knows, or anybody else who decides to jump in the race. At this point, there isn't. But they don't want to risk it, so they want South Carolina to be the first one. That's why they're doing this. It's not because of diversity. So what they have done in order to prevent this, now New Hampshire has in their rules, now Iowa has a caucus, New Hampshire has a primary. They're the very first primary. And New Hampshire's constitution is written where they are to be the very first primary in the country. And if primaries get moved up in other states, then they move theirs up. That's how they do it. So the DNC has said to New Hampshire, well, you can't do that this time. You have to be after South Carolina. New Hampshire says, well, it's in our state constitution, and we've had 100-year tradition being the very first primary in the country, and we're not going to change our ways now. We're proud of this. We like this. We want to continue doing this. And the DNC says to New Hampshire, do it. If you do it, you will be sanctioned. And this is what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is talking about, the sanctions that New Hampshire would face. It came out that the DNC was discussing essentially half of the delegates would not be counted, that if New Hampshire held their primary earlier than South Carolina, that they would be sanctioned by losing half of their delegates. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is talking about additional sanctions that we don't know about. These have not been publicized. So he's talking about if a candidate, he must have been told by the DNC handlers that if you step foot and try to campaign, or I'm not really sure what he's talking about, but he's saying that if you step foot in either of these states, then you're going to lose. Then any votes you would get, any delegates you would gain, you lose. That you automatically forfeit those delegates. It seems like you would be able to go into those states and campaign. I mean, people have been there. There was of course the fair. Of course, you should be allowed to campaign in a state. Maybe he didn't really clarify, but maybe it's that you're not allowed to go there for their primary that they plan to hold, because basically New Hampshire was the DNC gave them until September 1st to modify their calendar and to not be the first primary in the country or face those sanctions. And New Hampshire, by September 1st, pretty much just said, go F yourself. I said, no. We're still going to be first. Thanks for your suggestion. So now the DNC has done a lot of threatening and coercion, essentially, and a lot of scare tactics to those states, and have said, all right, well, if you go through with it, and then they're kind of listing off all these things they may or may not do. Now, they don't make anything official until September 14th. So just in a couple of days, the DNC will get together and they will vote on exactly how they're going to punish New Hampshire or any other state who decides to hold their primary early. So that is what he's talking about, is these punishments. Now, none of these are set in stone yet, but these must have been the ones that have been floating around. So the ones floating, so it's unclear if it's, okay, if a candidate steps foot in your state between now and the primary, then you lose, then the candidate loses their delegates. That would discourage RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson from showing up in those states and campaigning in those primaries and winning those primaries when they inevitably hold them before South Carolina. They're doing all of these really crazy rules. So they're just trying to really, really strong arm and discourage these states. And then in addition, discourage the candidates from allowing those states to have their primaries first. Now, those states are planning on and probably will just have their primaries first, and they will just tell the DNC, you don't get to change your rules just so that you don't embarrass the sitting president. Democracy is democracy. You so-called defenders of democracy. Here's the DNC saying, we've got to win. Democrats have to win or else democracy dies. And here they are, again, being the most anti-democratic party that there is out there right now. And they're rubbing it in our faces. They're not even shy about it. And yet they're trying to gaslight us into making us believe that they're the Democratic ones. They're the ones who are actually protecting democracy. And it's Donald Trump and the GOP who are destroying it at every turn. Meanwhile, the Republican Party has such a fair process right now that they've allowed a no-name Vivek Ramaswamy to rise up to third and to be center stage on the debate. I mean, you did not see that in the Democratic primary in 2020 when you had Andrew Yang. Did they treat Andrew Yang like that? Vivek and Andrew Yang are very similar candidates. Look at how the Democratic Party treated Andrew Yang. You've got this businessman who's not white. And how did the DNC treat him? They called him a racist. They actually brought him on various different night shows, and Democrats smeared him and called him a racist. What is the GOP doing with Vivek Ramaswamy? They're letting him compete. Now, the other establishment candidates are angry, as we saw at the last GOP debate. They don't like Vivek Ramaswamy. They want an establishment person there, but they could say all they want to say, but they're not rigging that election. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party has super delegates there who count more. This is a prominent person who has more knowledge, whose vote counts more than the average delegate, who is just not as quite frankly, insider establishment. That's what that means. So the Democratic Party has all of these mechanisms in order to rig the system. This is what many of us told Robert F. Kennedy Jr. early on when he announced his campaign back in April. This is a rigged system. They're never going to let you win. And he's seeing this. And now he's saying that he's going to be seeking potentially some alternatives because of it. And good for him. He probably should. He not probably. He absolutely should. He should have never run as a Democrat to begin with. But at the same time, I'm glad that he has, and I'm glad he's now starting to change his tune and he's starting to think about running potentially not as a Democrat, maybe filing as an independent. He's got until February to do that if he wants to be on the ballot. Maybe he'll want to join. Maybe the Libertarian Party will pick him up because they've got ballot access. I mean, who knows? Stranger things have happened. But he's at least looking outside of the Democratic Party. Now, the big question is, sorry, my allergies are acting up today, so you guys are going to have to bear with me. The issue is, then the question is with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is then does he behave as a spoiler? So what happens if he chooses to run third party? Now, I believe that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would be the most viable third-party candidate, the most viable independent who has ever run in probably anyone's lifetime who's alive today. I think that he could be as formidable as an independent as Teddy Roosevelt was when he created the Bull Moose Party and ran against Taft and Wilson. Of course, that ended up with Wilson winning ultimately. Taft lost, Wilson won because Republicans split the vote. But that's because Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican president. But he was a populist, big time populist. He didn't agree with the policies of Taft, felt like he was too corporatist, felt like he was too establishmenty. So he started the Bull Moose Party, ran, got a huge amount of votes, but because of that, Wilson ended up winning. In this situation, Kennedy appeals to not only Democrats, he's running as a Democrat, but he appeals largely to Republicans as well. So he really could gain votes from both sides. And when people try to determine whether or not he would be a spoiler for one or the other, tough to say with him. It's not as clear cut. This is not like Bernie Sanders, who, if he were to break off and be a third party candidate, would have very clearly taken mostly from the Democratic Party. Same thing with Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West running on the Green Party ticket. Dr. Cornel West, even though he started off his campaign talking with more of a populist vibe, once he joined, when he left the People's Party and joined the Green Party, he's definitely switched his platform. He's definitely way more appealing to the left. And he's just going to detract voters from Democrats, from Joe Biden. Honestly, though, probably not. Usually people who vote Green were not going to vote at all. They were going to do a third party write-in. They probably were not going to vote for Biden. So I don't think he's going to be pulled. I think that's like when they say, oh, he's going to be like a spoiler like Jill Stein. No, the people who voted for Jill Stein weren't going to vote for Hillary Clinton anyway. So that's just bull. It's just a bunch of bull. It's just a bunch of victim blaming or voter shaming or whatever you want to say. But nonetheless, Cornel West is not going to be able to pull voters from both sides of the aisle the way that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. can. And this is where it gets interesting to think about this thought experiment of what happens if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. goes independent. There's a real possibility that and I hope his campaign is watching. I know some of them do watch this show. I hope they are watching I hope they're having these discussions because this is really interesting. This could be the only way he wins, is if he runs third party. And it's not because, and I do not believe that he would win the majority of the Electoral College votes. Now, you have to remember, in the presidential election, it's 270 to win. You have to get 270 Electoral College votes, and that is it. It's 51%, 50 plus 1, 50% plus in order to win. And so if there's three candidates, if you've got Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the mix, you've got Trump and you've got Biden, or Gavin Newsom, let's say, and the three of them are running, one of them must get that 51% or nobody wins. So it's not who gets the most out of the three-way split. You've got to get the majority out of all the votes in order to win. And if you don't, then what happens? The vote goes to the House of Representatives. Now, normally, if you had, let's say, Trump and, I don't know, let's just like let's say Vivek Ramaswamy, and Vivek decides to go third party, and I don't think Vivek would take anybody really from the Democratic side. I think he would split the ticket with Trump. Let's say then Biden doesn't get the majority because people don't want Biden. Let's say he's on the ticket, and Vivek takes enough from the Republicans, but there's not enough Democrats who cared about Biden. Maybe a lot of them voted for Trump, right? Because there's that sort of dynamic there. If that three-way tie were to go to the House of Representatives, my guess is Biden would win. Even if Biden got the lowest of the three-way tie, even if he was the lowest. And that is because the House of Reps, the Congress right now is pretty divided 50-50. The Senate is 50-50 plus one Kamala Harris. So it's Democrat controlled in the Senate. But the House is, it's Republican controlled, but not by much. So if you had a bunch of Republicans and Democrats casting their votes, and they have to choose between Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Joe Biden, and you've got Republicans splitting the vote between Trump and Vivek in those states, then Joe Biden would probably win that election and end up being president of the United States. But you can't say that if it comes to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because now you got a lot of Republicans voting for him, and you've got, of course, a lot of Democrats voting for the Kennedy. And you'd have a lot of Democrats thinking, well, crap, if it's between RFK Jr. or Trump, because no one's going to vote for Biden, then which one would we rather have? My bet is Democrats would turn back and actually embrace Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And the reason they would embrace him is because he probably at that point would say, you know what, vote for me in this runoff that we have to have in the House. Vote for me, and if you do, I'll come back and be a Democrat. Like he's running on the Democratic ticket now. He'll say, look, I'll come back. I won't be an independent. I'll be a Democratic president if you guys vote for me. And I think they would do it. I think the Democratic Party in that instance would say, if it's Donald Trump or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be a Democrat, then we're going to take Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They'd be forced to embrace him. So let me try to break this down again, because maybe this is kind of complicated. But imagine the three-way tie, because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. takes votes from both Trump and Gavin Newsom or Joe Biden. And it's a three-way tie, and no one hits that 270. No one wins. And it goes to the House. And in that scenario, my guess is Biden is third place. I actually think more people would vote for Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. than Joe Biden. Joe Biden is just not popular. Democrats don't like Joe Biden. Nobody wants Joe Biden to be president. So I would think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Trump would, but even if they didn't, even if it was Trump and Biden and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in third, again, Democrats are going to want not Trump. Or they'd rather have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and they would know that they could maybe sway some of those Republican states. Once it goes to the House, sorry, I skipped a step, and this is an important thing to know. Once it goes to the House of Representatives, all of the reps from the state, from each state, have to get together and decide how they're voting, and they're casting one vote together. So the state of California would get one vote. The state of Oregon gets one vote. The state of Florida gets one vote. And all of their delegates have to get together and decide on who is that one person they're voting for. And so you'd end up, when you break the map down that way, there are, I believe, more red states than blue states. So when you're doing 50 votes, DC doesn't get a vote in this particular situation with the Electoral College. When you've got those 50 states, you're probably, Democrats know this, it's going to go Republican. So knowing that, if they're looking at Donald Trump and they're looking at Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and they know a lot of Republicans like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I can guarantee you there's going to be a full court press from that Democratic Party going around courting and lobbying every single Republican they can to sway towards Robert F. Kennedy Jr., to say he's a compromise candidate. A lot of people like, Republicans like him, Democrats like, so vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And there's a possibility that many of the Republicans do, in fact, vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So if that's the case, there's a possibility that Congress then, when the vote goes to them, that they end up bringing forward Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because he would say to Democrats, look, I'm one of you. And Republicans like him because he's got a lot of Republican policies that they really like. And he could end up winning the presidential election this way. It's a very long shot way. It's very weird. It's unconventional, but it has happened before. This is not This is how Thomas Jefferson was elected. This is how John Quincy Adams was elected. So this has been done. It hasn't been done in a really long time, but doesn't mean it can't be done now. And it very well could be done. And I think if he goes independent, there's a very strong possibility that this happens. There's a very strong possibility that none of the candidates reach that 270, in which case it does go to Congress. And I bet you Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s team is sitting there talking about this. My guess is they're placing their bets and they're thinking, how do we want to go about this? And my guess is they're thinking this strategy through. And what do they have to lose? They have really nothing to lose. What there could be, the loss, I guess the loss is that Joe Biden could potentially win, right? And he ends up acting as a spoiler for Joe Biden. And I think, I don't know how Robert F. Kennedy Jr. feels about that. I don't know who he'd rather have as president, Trump or Biden. But I would prefer Trump over Biden because I believe Biden is marching us towards World War III. Well, for one, Biden is not even president. I don't know who is, but it's not Biden. So would prefer somebody who's not a warmonger or controlled by warmongers. That would be my ideal. So it's a very complicated, it's a very long shot strategy. But when you think about it, and maybe Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s team is thinking about it, it is the only way forward for him. And it's a viable way forward. It's weird. Things are going to get weird. Things are going to get really weird in this election, but it might be fun. It certainly will be enjoyable. And then in that case, I could guarantee you for sure, the DNC will swoop in. They'll move Biden out. They'll put Newsom in. You could almost guarantee that. If Robert F. Kennedy Jr. decides to go independent, all things are going to get real weird real quick. Democratic Party is going to be figuring out, okay, how do we get Biden out? Because this is going to be a nightmare. He's definitely not going to win. Gavin Newsom can maybe go up against RFK Jr. and Donald Trump. That's the way they're going to be playing it out in their mind. This is going to be an election for the ages, guys. That's all I have to say. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be different. And it's gonna make history, but that's only if RFK Jr. has the cojones to actually go forward with that type of a plan. Otherwise, it's going to be a fairly straightforward election. Probably going to still see Trump and a standard establishment Democrat, and it'll be the same old, same old. But this is his chance to really shake things up and really to challenge the duopoly, challenge the two-party system. I think it'd be healthy for democracy if he really truly wants to bring America back to a democratic core. This would be the way to do it. It would be to challenge the two-party system, and it would be to jump in the race and just let things fall where they fall. I don't think it'll be a Teddy Roosevelt situation. I don't think it'll be that. I don't think it'll split the Republican ticket. I think he's going to split pretty evenly both tickets. And independence is really who he appeals to. So it's going to be very, very interesting. But that is what is happening with RFK Jr. And that is it really interesting new development if he's really truly serious about potentially running outside of the Democratic ticket. I do want to play this clip for you. This is Gavin Newsom. He's now saying that he's not going to run for president. But again, he doesn't need to run. That's been my theory all along. He's just going to replace Biden, not run. Here's what he had to say.
Filing deadlines haven't passed. President Biden doesn't run. Why shouldn't we consider you a likely candidate?
Well, I think the vice president is naturally the one lined up, and the filing deadlines are quickly coming to pass. And I think we need to move past this notion that he's not going to run. President Biden is going to run, and looking forward to getting him reelected. I think there's been so much wallowing in the last few months and hand-wringing in this respect, but we're gearing up for the campaign. We're looking forward to it.
But you hear these calls privately. What do you tell these donors who are wallowing in this?
Time to move on. Let's go.
And am I supposed to interpret that comment about the vice president that if for some reason the president chose not to run at this point,
well, that's the
everybody rallies around her?
It's the Biden-Harris administration. Maybe I'm a little old-fashioned.
Yeah,
maybe I'm a little old-fashioned about presidents and vice presidents. I was a lieutenant governor, so I'm a little subjective on the subject.
Yeah, he's a little old-fashioned. You're right. You mean a little establishment. I'm a good establishment soldier. That's what he should be saying. Here's Joe Biden. Look, nobody wants Joe Biden to be. Democrats are not interested. There's Chuck Todd even saying, what do you say to all these, the donors, the private donor calls that are not that private because we all know about them, are sitting there saying Biden can't be the guy. He's unpopular. People don't like him. This is Biden. Recently, he was in Vietnam and he was stumbling around so bad. A staffer actually got on, cut him off, and like shoot him off the stage. This is where we're at with our American president. I mean, really an embarrassing moment. Here it is.
We talked about at the conference overall. We talked about stability. We talked about making sure that the third world, the southern hemisphere had access to changes, had access. It wasn't confrontational at all.
Thank you, everybody. This ends the press conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you bringing U.S. strategic interests above human rights here in Vietnam?
I've raised it with every person I've met with.
Mr. President,
Are you worried about your son being indicted, Mr. President?
Who cuts a president off while he's still talking? Even if that was the end of the press conference, which it was the scheduled end, and that was kind of the last question. Still, he was still finishing up his sentences, and they comes on and is like, "Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye." That's that's who we have. This guy's unpopular. Nobody really wants him to be president again. So we'll see. It's going to be very, very, very interesting. All right, guys, I want to tell you about Field of Greens. This is one of my favorite products out there because it really does help me feel so much more revived and nourished. I get tired a lot. I got a stressful job. And I don't sleep that well. And of course, I don't eat as well as I need to eat. And so Field of Greens has just been a wonderful supplement to my diet. I just mix it in with water, ice water, and it tastes like iced tea, iced green tea with lemon because I love the lemon lime flavor. But listen, this product is going to help you prevent heart disease and lower your blood pressure and your cholesterol. And that is all according to the Mayo Clinic, saying that if you get all of your fruits and vegetables into your diet, then you're going to have better stats, better health. And what Field of Greens is this wonderful product of real fruits and vegetables that are dried. They're organic. They carefully select which fruits and vegetables are in the mixture. They then ensure that you're getting all of the powerful nutrients and antioxidants and prebiotics and all of these wonderful things that you need in your diet. And you just mix it into your water, drink it, and you will feel healthier. You will feel better. I feel it when I don't drink this. I really do notice it. It's just a wonderful product. Brickhouse has really, really great high quality products. So check it out. Go to their website, fieldofgreens.com, and you can get 15% off your first order. So try it out. Browse around their website. They've got, like I said, high quality products. Check out their products. Put them in your cart and get 15% off that first order by using the promo code Kim, again, fieldofgreens.com.